Hello everyone. So one of the most frequently asked questions I get on this channel is, what's better, crit instant cast or swiftness instant cast reflux? So a long time ago I did make a video comparing the two, but back then we didn't have the Trixion that we have today, and I didn't even have full relic set back then. So I thought I'd kind of revisit that topic just to see what the state of the two builds are at right now, at least in terms of simulated DPS, and talk about the builds a little bit. So we'll go ahead and start with the crit instant cast build, so let's go ahead and take a look. So for this one, I'm running 1650 crit and 530 swiftness. For the skills, nothing too special. You can see my skill point distribution here. This is if you have every skill point in the game, and you'll see the tripods on the right hand side, and all of them will be maxed. For the runes, here's what I'm using. Just a mixture of Gale Wind, Quick Recharge, Rage, pretty standard stuff. For the gems, you'll notice here that I'm not taking a CDR gem on Punishing Strike, because in my previous videos I have shown that Punishing Strike is not really great for DPS, so allocating a cooldown gem on Blaze instead is more efficient in terms of damage. For the engraving, since I am using the standard Enhanced Strike build and not the Final Strike build, I'm using Keen Blunt Weapon, but if you're using the Final Strike tripods, simply remove Keen Blunt Weapon and use Cursed All. And for the card set, I'm using Light of Salvation 18 Awakening. So with that, I will be doing this test with 6 set Nightmare. I currently have 2 level 2 sets. The last level 2 set just gives me slightly more damage and slightly more CDR, so I don't think waiting for that to do this video is going to change much, to be quite honest. And everything is pretty much as you saw. So with that, I'll be doing a 4-minute test just to make this as accurate as possible in terms of comparison rather than your standard 2-minute test. I'll be muting my microphone during this, so here we go. with that. A crit rate of about 74%, which if we take a look, lines up with 59 plus 15, which comes from Adrenaline, so that's basically accurate, and a DPS of about 5.3 million. You can see that I did slip into Magic Addiction at the end here, and a full crit build, especially when running with supports that give you mana, will likely slip more into Magic Addiction, and you'll have less uptime and boundless MP, so that's just how things go. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to the Swiftness build. I'm just going to flip the stats around. So it's 1650 Swiftness instead of 530 crit. I'm going to make a couple of adjustments to the tripods here. The first one being on Frost Call. I'm going to take Mind Enhancement and Unstable Rule in this case. The reason why we take Mind Enhancement is because with this build, you will run out of mana generally. And we take Unstable Rule because it actually does more damage, and you don't really need the cooldown in this case, nor the mana burn effect from Rule Enhancement. And lastly, on Punishing Strike, I will take Mind Enhancement, again for the aforementioned reason. If you have a support that has mana, you don't need to take these tripods, you can take the Wide Angle Attack and the Enlightenment. In any case, it doesn't really affect your DPS, it's more, quality of life. For the gems, I'm going to omit a Blaze cooldown and a Seraphic Hail cooldown in favor of a Punishing Strike cooldown, because Blaze's cooldown is already low enough, and a Frost Call damage gem, just because, again, you have more cooldown reduction in this build, you don't need as many cooldown gems. For the engravings, instead of Keen Blunt Weapon, I'm going to be using Raid Captain, because we have enough move speed to make this better than Cursed Doll. And pretty much everything else is going to stay the same. This first test that I'll do for this build will still use 6-set Nightmare, but I'll also try a test that uses 2 Dominion and 4 Nightmare instead. So once again, just gonna hit the boss for 4 minutes and see how we do. So with that, I got a crit rate of about 34%, which if we take a look at 18 plus 15, it's close enough, and a DPS of about 5.07 million. So in terms of raw DPS, the 6 Nightmare Swiftness build will do less damage than the 6 set Nightmare crit build, right? What you gain in return is a lot of flexibility, mobility, shorter cooldowns, and a different playstyle because you have, much shorter cooldowns. If you want to be competitive with DPS on this build, then I recommend instead of using 6 Nightmare, using 2 Dominion and 4 Nightmare, or even 4 Dominion and 2 Nightmare. So the far more common one is going to be the 2 Dominion 4 Nightmare because it doesn't really require a lot to maintain. So let's go ahead and do the swap here. So now, of course, when doing this, if you just cast your Awakening like this, you have 2 minutes on this buff, but this cooldown is a roughly 2 minutes and 36 seconds, so you'll have a bit of downtime in between that. So what people will do to solve that is at the beginning of the fight, they'll open up their engravings. They'll go ahead and just slot in Awakening as their quick engravings in the battle area, cast their Awakening, and then swap back. So to mimic that, I'll quickly go into my engravings and just set it to like Awakening 2. And if you do that and cast your Awakening at the beginning, you can see that the cooldown of your Awakening is less than 2 minutes, which gives you full uptime on the buff. And after that, once you have your, Nightmare set effect and all of that stuff, and you've swapped back, the idea is, you're fighting the boss, you're casting your spells. And as we see, Swiftness Reflux has no problem staying in Boundless MP. You cast your Awakening inside that, and you'll see this number quickly change to 1 minute, and you have about 5-second downtime on the buff itself, so it's not too bad. Of course, if you're in a fight where you have to walk all the way to the boss, like a Guardian Raid or something like that, you have lower uptime on this buff and you'll have to cast it, wasting more time. But in general, right, the real content we really care about is Legion Raids, and in those cases you just cast it immediately and go in, and you start to fight the boss. So that's what I'll go ahead and do here. I'll just cast my first Awakening under Boundless MP, starts the fight, and then we'll go from there. And once again, I'm going to be doing a 4-minute test. with that, a crit rate of about 34%, which again kind of makes sense. My awakening has come back off cooldown, and as you can see, the DPS is much higher at 5.44 million, and this doesn't require me to have Awakening 2 permanently equipped just at the beginning, as long as I cast my Awakening inside Boundless MP. So for those of you who want to play the Swiftness build and enjoy the benefits of being very fast, having a short spacebar and being able to spam all your spells like this, and you want to also be competitive on damage, I highly recommend looking into the 2 Dominion for Nightmare set like this. So in terms of kind of ranking these builds in terms of DPS, this Swiftness build with the 2 Dominion 4 Nightmare has the highest theoretical ceiling, then the standard Crits build with 6 Nightmare, then the standard Swiftness build with 6 Nightmare as well. However, in Legion raids, as we're fighting them, of course you know that these rotations, both with crit and swiftness, are not viable, right? You won't be able to do that constant stream of attacks on any boss, maybe except, oh, I don't know, Vaultin Gate 2, right? But even Vaultin Gate 2 jumps and does mechanics and cutscenes and things like that. And while that does hurt both builds, in both the crit and swiftness build, the crit build is slightly hurt less because they do more damage in one rotation than the swiftness build, whereas the swiftness build's biggest strength is being able to push out more rotations than the crit build. Despite saying all that, I personally find it's important to play what you believe is fun. A lot of people out there really enjoy the fast-paced nature of the Swiftness build, and are always asking me, oh, is it competitive? Will it do enough damage? And I'll tell you right now, plenty of people in Korea play this build, so I wouldn't worry about it. If you enjoy this crazy, fast, spammy build, then play it. It's extremely fun, and while it does hurt your fingers, kind of gives you a nice high when playing it like this. Right? So a couple of other questions I'll address since I always get them in these types of videos. So someone might say, why are you hitting from the back when you have Hitmaster? Hitmaster increases the damage of all of your skills regardless of what direction you attack from, as long as they don't have a front attack or back attack affix like Squall. Right, so every other one of these abilities will benefit from Hitmaster. So if you've ever seen any of my rating videos or any of my DPS tests, you'll know that instead of Seraphic Hail, I prefer to use Doomsday. And lately I've been doing a lot of tests with Seraphic Hail, so people are asking me, hey, are you still using Doomsday? And the answer is yes. In my standard rating build, I am using Doomsday, and people like to ask, well, what's the difference between this and Seraphic Hail? In terms of DPS, they're fairly similar, but Doomsday gives you a little bit more burst, but is more punishing if you can't land it, whereas Seraphic Hail is the turn your mind off, you'll hit most of the time, and it's consistent and reliable damage. In my case, I like a little bit of a challenge. I think burst is an important thing to have as any DPS, even as Reflux, even though our burst is, practically non-existent. Having Doomsday allows me to push damage after a stagger, or, a mechanic or something like that, and is why I prefer using it. I didn't use it for this test because Swiftness doesn't really use Doomsday, and I wanted to keep these skill sets the same between the two. So that's it for this video. Again, to summarize, all 3 builds perform reasonably well, play whatever you enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.